2022 Formula One launch season has officially kicked off, with Haas revealing its livery today, as well as giving us the first small glimpse of car designs created around the championship's new rules. The team released renders of its VF-22 car, and while they didn't show Haas's definitive design for 2022, there's still plenty to discuss from what we saw, as well as hear what the team was saying heading into the new year. Now, joining me to do that are Luke Smith and Jonathan Noble, so let's crack on. Luke, Haas's 2022 livery, let's come to that first. The colour schemes, everyone likes to get very up and angsty about things if they're not too different, or in fact, massively different. But for this one, it looks an awful lot like the design Haas ran last year. So what do you make of it?
Yeah, it is pretty much the same as what the team ran last year when it made that big change when Uralkali came on as a title sponsor. Nikita Mazepin's obviously the main backer, owned by his father. And I think it's quite nice though. I do like it. It's a very slick, very clean design from Haas. It's sort of a story of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that fans, they are always sort of thinking like, oh, let's see something very dramatic, a very big change. We saw that with Haas a couple of years ago when they had that black and gold livery for one season, obviously. But I think that maybe sort of some angst about there not being a lot of change. It's kind of, well, what do you expect? They've got obviously sponsors and commitments and various things that teams have to cater towards. So I don't think we were ever going to see anything too dramatic that was a massive diversion from what we saw last year for Haas. But overall, I think it's a pretty good design. And it's nice to just get a first taste of what this year's grid is going to look like.
Indeed. John, what were your thoughts on Haas's new livery? Well, kind of new livery.
Yeah, I mean, it's neat. It's very neat and tidy. I think what was perhaps most surprising today is we've had such a big build up to the new rules era. 22, all new cars, new designs, ground effect, everything completely different. And actually, the car didn't look massively as different as perhaps we'd kind of been expecting. I think we were expecting something would look really different, very radical from that concept car that F1 produced last year. So it looked quite similar. It's only when you go into the fine details actually you notice the difference, like that, the rear wing with the end plate not being there. The front wing didn't look dramatically different because of the way the livery was panned out. But we got to remember, this is still a render. It's still an early version of the design. They won't say how far different the car will be in Barcelona, but I think no teams are going to show their true colours just yet.
Indeed. I think what's particularly interesting about this one is that, first of all, Haas, let's face it, they were the backmarker team for the last couple of years, especially last year. So they're not necessarily going to be the team that's going to be introducing the massive aerodynamic, revolutions and innovations and everything that's going to be coming. But nevertheless, I think there was enough to show that it was, while it was still obviously massively based on the demo car that F1 has been showing off the last few years, it kind of looked, let's face it, a bit uglier. I think you got your first insight on what F1 engineers are sort of going to be doing with the rules as they're written. And the fact is that although there are a lot of little bits on that nice demo car that make it look very attractive, probably not extremely good for airflow. So I think that's Haas sort of showing us maybe things are going to be a little bit not as aesthetically pleasing. But yeah, indeed, Luke, that's my question to you. Do you think this is a sign of things to come, or, as I said, is Haas a sort of outlier because of its position in the F1 pecking order?
I think it's probably a sign of where things are going. I think that it's always a thing in F1 that we'll sort of see the initial mock-ups and it'll be a very attractive looking car, and then the teams will sort of look at the actual technical aspects behind it and go, well, actually, let's do this and do that, and it ends up something looking quite different. Obviously, I think it was 2014 when we had the protruding noses, let's call them. I think it was a very good example of function over aesthetics, let's say. I think it's a sign of where things are going to go. And Simone Resta and Steiner, John and I had a chat with them as part of a media call after the launch. And Simone Resta, he was very open. He said that although there are fewer technical freedoms compared to previous years, there are still lots of areas you can sort of go down, and some more than others, obviously. But I think we are going to see teams obviously exploiting what they can. And it may be that, we end up with car designs that are not quite as nice as the show cars that we saw from F1 last year, but that is, I think, is fully to be expected.
Well, the other key point to make about what we're going to be seeing with all the launches being revealed this launch season is that the really important bits of these new cars are on the floor. So underneath it, it's going to be the Venturi tunnels, the return of ground effect. That's where lap time's going to come. That's going to be where that's where teams could really get things wrong if they haven't got how the airflow is attaching and or staying attached and detaching in the right places. If they haven't got that right, they could be in real trouble. But if they nail it, that's where things are going to be really, really important. I'm sure Adrian Newey and co are extremely excited about things like that. But yeah, John, with that in mind, do you think that perhaps even more than ever, the teams are going to be restricting what they've actually done when it comes to these sort of livery launches and initial reveals before the really, really important bits get finally shown in testing.
Absolutely. I think this year more than any, because teams know that they're all coming at this with a complete clean sheet of paper. They've all got their own ideas. And I think when we get to Barcelona, there'll be, many different versions of many interpretations of the rules. There'll be a big spread, and eventually it'll take maybe half a season for people to work out which was the best direction. But for now, I think if a team feels it's found a good area of performance, be it the tunnels under the car, be it the rear wing, be it the front wing, be it any part of the aerodynamics, they're going to keep it secret. They'll either try to adjust the render so it's not the real thing. They will try to maybe make the render wrong so it points rival teams in the other direction. The key thing at the moment is teams don't want their rivals to know what they're really up to and what's really going on. And I think there's also an awful lot of guesswork at the moment. People don't really know. We spoke to Simone Resta just now. He says we've got guesses on how fast the cars will be, but we don't really know, so don't know how it's going to interact with the tyres. We've got guesses how well they'll follow other cars, but until they're out there in Barcelona and until they're on a track with another car 1 second in front of them, we don't know if these rules have worked or haven't worked, or how the racing is going to be, or how anything. I think it's the most uncertainty we've had as kind of full-on observers for many, many years.
I think one of the key takeaways today is just how sort of sleek the car looks with the lack of, the incredibly complex barge boards and things like that everybody got used to in the last few years. But yeah, as you guys have said, you spoke to Steiner and Resta just a few minutes ago, let's face it, before we started recording this video. So let's chat about how they see things unfolding for Haas this year. It's a big year, let's face it. Team owner Gene Haas pretty much held back on investment until Formula One's new technical and financial rules were in place. We know he's not very happy about the fact that you can't just come in and win very quickly. It's very difficult, especially under the previous generation of rules in Formula One. And so the team has changed accordingly. Its technical staff are now based at Ferrari's Maranello factory. Lots of Ferrari staff sent to work with Haas to help with Ferrari's restructuring under the cost cap. So it's a big year ahead. The team wants a big jump up the order. And of course, Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher, they're no longer rookies. So Luke, how did you find Steiner and Resta today? What was the sort of sense coming out of the team about how they're feeling about 2022?
I think there is a quiet optimism. I think that, Gunstein, he was very open about how difficult last year was, and it was a transition year. The team always said that 2022 and the new regulations, that was going to be the big focus. So they didn't want to bother too much with any development in the end on last year's car. So I think that does place a lot of pressure on what they are doing for this season. But yeah, Gunstein, he spoke about sort of previous years. He said sort of like 16, 17, 18, the team was producing pretty good cars, particularly as a new team. And he said that he's got a similar kind of feeling, like there was sort of a similar sort of feel and optimism, and he's seen all the work that Simone Resta and his team, as you say, based out of Maranello now, have been doing on the car. So I think that, I think the expectation is that they can get back up the order, start fighting for points again. As you say, the added experience now that Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin have, that's going to be hugely important. I think with Schumacher in particular, we did see some good signs of progress towards the end of last year. So it's about carrying that through. But I think the team, they are optimistic. I think there's a good sort of vibe, I think, after how difficult last year was. But as John said, it's just so uncertain where things are going to be, because you might be well ahead of your own predictions, but then if everyone is even further ahead of that, then it's going to be very difficult to catch up. So I think it's quite optimism, but they're very cautious in that as well.
Indeed. Well, John, let's go back to what is really different about Haas this year, and especially the way the team is structured. Can you just run us through those changes and sort of how it's all going to work with the staff coming across from Ferrari, how Haas is essentially different to how it was, especially when it joined the championship in 2016?
Yeah, the team's been quite clear from day one. Both Gunther Steiner and Gene Haas said that, to be competitive with the limited budget they've got, is you take as much as you can from a manufacturer, from a works team, and they did the deal with Ferrari. So took as much of the car as possible on a simple customer basis. But what's changed this year is that relationship with Ferrari is much more embedded. Now they've got their own Maranello hub, so they've got their own work base coming out of Ferrari. And as part of the kind of impact of the cost cap, where Ferrari was over the budget limit, it's had to kind of get rid of staff on its own team. And these have been seconded basically to Haas. So Simone Resta, for example, senior designer at Ferrari, is now in charge of the kind of design of the car at Haas. He's pushing on there. A lot of staff have come across and are working on there. So it's not quite it's not a Ferrari B team as such, but There's a very strong relationship there with Ferrari. The links are much closer, being based in Maranello. I'm sure there's a bit of knowledge flowing through when the Haas staff members and Ferrari staff members meet in the restaurants in the evening. There'll be little snippets of information going across. So I think it will give the team some confidence about the job they're doing. It's no longer in complete isolation, using Dallara and their own factory in the UK. Being based in Maranello will push them forward, I think.
Indeed. Well, a small side point I was just reminded of in a delightful email I received from an Autosport reader a little while ago. Second year in the championship, Mick Schumacher obviously often does a lot better. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. Keith has been as well, as you said, not a rookie. But getting to the final question now, and it's the same to both of you. Luke, I'm afraid we'll come to you first because that's just how we sort of ran the order of this video. How well do you expect Haas to do in 2022? Can they go from being backmarker to having success in Formula One?
I think compared to last year, I mean, there's no excuse really not to make a decent step forward. I think that they really do have to be back to scoring regular points, and it's I think even sort of before last year. I mean, you look at sort of 2020, for example, that was a very difficult year for the team, and 2019 as well. They've sort of been through, I think, a rocky few years, and I think the fact that they've put so much on 2022 and the new regulations, I think that really, it's going to be probably a big make or break moment for the team. I mean, if it falls flat, I mean, Gene Haas might sort of think, well, look, what am I doing if we can't even succeed under these new rules? But yeah, I think there's decent optimism. I think that we're not going to see them sort of vaulting towards maybe sort of the top of the midfield or anything like that. But I think I'd be hopeful they could sort of get back towards nicking the odd point here and there. I think they're perhaps going to be sort of like mid to lower midfield order. But I think we're definitely going to see, I think, a decent step forward compared to what we saw last year.
Great. And John, what are your predictions for Haas in 2022?
Yeah, so the new rules, this package of rules that Liberty have introduced to try to level the playing field with the kind of restricted aerodynamic testing, the cost cap, cars that are closer. It's all aimed to make things equal, allow teams like Haas to have their day in the sun and get podiums and get wins. But I think it's too much to go from a team that was at the back last year to be pushing at the front of the midfield. But I think with the increased impetus from Ferrari, people who've worked at Ferrari, the regulations, the fact they've spent so long developing this car, I think they should be in that midfield pack and fighting for points. This year, they've got Schumacher and Mazepin have had their rookie season. So I think it shouldn't be as bad a season as last year, but it's how high up that midfield is too difficult to guess right now. Because I think, the teams know as little as we do about where this competitive order is going to shake out.
Indeed. Well, great. Thanks to you both for chatting today. Make sure everybody stick around. We'll be taking you through many more videos in the coming days and weeks of all the car launches from the 2022 Formula One season.